In today's show, Jusuf Nurkic's run at EuroBasket comes to an end. Plus, the Blazers add a new big man to the training camp roster. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. We're still 3 days a week, running along in September. But coming to the final week of September, we're going to shift back to 5 days a week. It'll be only daily Trailblazers podcast. But for now, make the show your first listen every day, whenever we have podcasts. You're listening to Wednesday, September 7th show. Appreciate you listening. We got a fun one for you. Jusuf Nurkic, since last time we spoke, has played 2 basketball games at EuroBasket, and the Bosnia Herzegovina run came to an end against Lithuania today. Plus, the Blazers add another big man to the training camp roster, Davontae Cacok. We'll talk about him in the second segment. I got a couple of listener questions to end the show. Let's talk Nurk, though, first. Since we last spoke, the Bosnia upset Slovenia. They're in a position to, if they beat 2 very good teams at EuroBasket, advance to the elimination round and out of the group stages, but they lose to France, and then they lose to Lithuania on Wednesday. I'm on the East Coast right now, so watching these games happen at a normal time. Did not have to wake at 5:30, just had to watch them while I had breakfast here. Both of these games were Nurk played okay, but not super efficient, and I thought he came up against just big front lines was the problem. France, he got in foul trouble. Picked up 3 fouls in the first half, including one for flopping. The EuroLeague's got a rule where you get punished for flopping. Nurk flopped, or simulated, as they were calling it on the broadcast, called for a foul. 3 fouls in that first half. Didn't start the second half. But then when he came on in the third quarter, Bosnia was right in it against a good French team. French guard play left a little something to be desired. And so it was, Bosnia was able to hang in it. In fact, Nurk hit back-to-back threes just over the 7-minute mark, and Bosnia took the lead with 7 minutes left. Nurk hadn't played super well, but those 2 big threes were huge buckets. But then France just kind of found themselves late in the game and really ratcheted up the defense. Bosnia could not get into easy buckets late against France, and they kind of faded. Also, France just played really big. They just played really big at all times with Gobert and with Fall and with Poirier. They always basically had 2 7-footers in the game or close to it. I don't know how big Vincent Poirier is listed at, but he's big, 6'10 plus. That front line, I think, made it a little bit harder for Nurk to go to work. He'd had a real physical advantage against Slovenia, which doesn't have that crazy size. France's crazy size, or France's just depth of size, made his day a little bit harder. And then you saw that same thing against Lithuania. The 2 bigs killed Bosnia's group, and Herzegovina on the glass. Bosnia and Herzegovina on the glass. Domantas Sabonis and Jonas Valanciunas are both starting quality bigs in the NBA. They've got Izzy Brazdeikis. Lithuania's good, right? They've got 3 NBA players and some talent. This is a team that could conceivably win this whole thing, or at least will compete amongst the teams that could win this whole thing. I'm not picking against Luka and Slovenia because they're really good when he wears that jersey. But I think you saw it again in this game. Nurk just without a physical advantage. I thought Sabonis really outplayed him in this game. It happens. Nurk finished against Lithuania with 15 points, 5 boards, and assist, 6 of 14 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3, 2 of 4 from the free throw line. Shot 5 of 9 inside. The game really got away from Bosnia in the second quarter, where they got outscored by 14. And some of that is with Nurk on the bench to begin that quarter, but it's the way Bosnia had upset Slovenia is because their outside shooters got hot. John Roberson hit 7 threes. He did not have that type of continued hot shooting in this game. Dzanan Musa was great. More on him later in the show. But, again, big physical front line where Nurk couldn't overpower folks and Bosnia couldn't win. My big takeaway is France is a medalist in the Olympics. Lithuania has been really consistently a really competitive nation in international basketball. The win over Slovenia was really nice, but Luka shot 0 of 8 from 3, and Bosnian guard hit 7 3-pointers. It's just the magic of shooting. My takeaway from Nurk is this was maybe part of me was hoping to see a Jusuf Nurkic sort of supercharged as a focal point, as someone who knew he was going to be all these things. But some of the stuff that Nurk struggles with showed up here again in this game. He needed to, there was some times late against Lithuania where he just forced the issue and took some bad shots because he knew his team needed offense. We've seen Nurk do that at the NBA level, kind of just when things get tight, kind of abandon patience, not stick with what works. Sometimes you just kind of are what you are. I don't even think that's a really knock against Nurk. They needed him to go to work. He had to be their second best scorer. And so he kind of needed to force the issue. They don't have the guns, right? Like they needed Nurk to be that guy. But, where he didn't have a physical advantage, he doesn't take his time as much, or he says, okay, I got the switch. I don't have Sabonis. I don't have JV on me. I'm gonna go quickly, and takes a worse shot than he needed to. Nurk shoots threes in EuroLeague, and I think that's, he shoots like 4 or 5 a game, shot 5 in this one. I hope that in the NBA, Nurk shoots 1 3 a game. The FIBA line is closer. They need him to be more of the offense, all of these things. Maybe if you were hoping for more outside touch from Nurk, this EuroBasket run didn't do it for you. But for me, I don't need to see Nurk shoot any more threes. He was at times a real force on defense. He's the guy for them. He has to hold it down. That's not too dissimilar from what he'll be with the Blazers, where he's asked a big role in sort of anchoring the defense. A team that plays somewhat aggressive on pick and roll coverage and a bunch of zone, and Nurk has to anchor them on both styles of coverages. That won't really change. But if you were expecting hyper efficient monster Nurk in repping his home country, you didn't quite get that. He didn't quite get it. He didn't play poorly by any means. He was just inefficient, and some of the inefficiencies is because he was asked to kind of take charge a little bit more than maybe he's totally comfortable with in terms of offense, particularly against teams with quality NBA centers. This isn't low-level competition that you wanted Nurk to be a bum slayer against. This was these weren't bums. These were freaking Rudy Gobert, Jonas Valanciunas, and Domantas Sabonis. When he played against Mike Tobey in Slovenia, he gave Mike Tobey the business a little bit. He wasn't super efficient, but he was physically dominant in that game and drawing double teams and making them guard him and all of these things. He didn't have that physical advantage, and he wasn't nearly as dominant against teams with NBA quality front lines, which is to be expected. He plays against guys who are about as good as him. It's a little bit more challenging, and I think some of it is just if Nurk had a better pick and roll partner, he would have looked a little bit better. Dzanan Musa is a pretty good pick and roll partner, but he's looking to get downhill. I'm talking more of a setup guy, for lack of a better term, a pass first point guard. So this game against Lithuania was winner take all. The group would go, the winner of this would advance out of the group and go to the knockout stages. Bosnia came up short, ended up down as many as 20 in the third quarter, and this really didn't challenge late in this game. I think they were within 8 or 11 in the fourth quarter, and Bosnia and Lithuania gets a big 3, and it's a 14-point game with 60 seconds left, and see ya. That was that. I certainly enjoyed watching Nurk in this setting. I enjoyed watching Nurk against high-level competition. I've just enjoyed EuroBasket in general. It's really high-level basketball, and I would have enjoyed seeing a little more Nurk playing, but I don't think losing to France and Lithuania, 2 top-level teams, is something that you can really ding him against. These are top-level teams for a reason, certainly more NBA talent than he's rolling with on Bosnia. That's the end of summer Nurk, September Nurk. We will see him again when the Blazers open training camp in a little less than 3 weeks. What I want to talk about the second segment is who's going to join Nurk in training camp. The Blazers have added another name. Davontae Cacok joins the program, and also Norvel Pell no longer on the team, something that happened about within moments of me recording the last podcast. Let's talk all about that in the second segment. Before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar, best tasting protein bar that there is. If you need a little extra fuel, if you need something that packs real protein but isn't a high caloric intake, but still tastes great and gives you that little bit of sweetness that you might be craving, check out Built Bar. They're covered in 100% chocolate. They come in a whole bunch of different flavors, some short timers or some staples. My personal favorites are staples like peanut butter brownie and cookies and cream. I like them because they pack on average 17 grams of protein with 140 calories and just 4 net carbs because they have less than 5 grams of sugar. Packing a punch, tastes great. Go get yourself some. And here's a big one. For a long time, I've been telling you a promo code, but they've updated the promo code. So update it. Locked on 15 at built.com. It's going to save you 15%. That's locked on 15 to save 15% at built.com. All right. So not going to see Blazers play competitive basketball till they get on the practice court, and maybe we get flashes of them at training camp down in Santa Barbara, and then they start playing preseason games in October. But we do know some people who are going to join the program. We'll talk about Davontae Cacok in just a second. But first, a mea culpa, or really just a bummer timing for your boy. When I was recording Monday's show that I recorded on Sunday morning out here, and then posted shortly, posted basically right as I was watching the end of that Bosnian Slovenia game. Basically, as I was hitting publish, or as I was hitting stop on the recording, the Blazers announced that they had waived big man Norvel Pell. So I talked about all in that episode how Olivier Sarr was going to compete with Pell, and then less than 15 minutes after I finished recording this, the Pell news came out, and I didn't end up publishing this episode till a few hours later because I wanted to hold it off and do some editing and et cetera, et cetera. But I totally missed it, and the timing stunk. It stunk for me. I'm not like, woe is me or whatever, but Norvel Pell, if you listen to the last podcast, not on the team anymore. The Blazers have officially waived him. No reporting on why, but he's no longer there. So they've added another big to come in camp. Am I worried that they're going to waive Olivier Sarr as I do this podcast, and then I'm going to find out yes, I'm worried by that. But that's just the nature of the beast. 5 days a week, you can clean it up. 3 days a week, you have a little longer tail of having some incorrect information out on the airwaves. So Olivier Sarr, a 7-foot big man they added, that we talked about that on Sunday's show, but they've added another guy, Davontae Cacok, who is a 6'10 big, he's a center. He's maybe not giant center size, or 6'8", 6'9", depending on where he's listed. 6'8" is where I've seen him as small as from 6'7" to 6'9", depending on what roster and what database. But, a smaller guy, but he's power forward center type. He doesn't have much outside shooting. That's why I kind of hasn't made a three in his parts of 3 NBA season, hasn't attempted a three in parts of his NBA season. So he's played a little power forward with the Spurs, to be sure. He wasn't always the biggest guy on the floor, but a big man, Davontae Cacok, who he's played in parts of 3 seasons came up with the Lakers and spent part of one season and part of the next with the Lakers, and then last season played a portion of that season with the Spurs. 36 NBA games in total, averaging 2.5 points, 2.2 rebounds, and 6.3 minutes. This is just big man depth. I knew of Cacok as an end of the bench name for the Lakers when they won the title in the bubble, but not much else about him. He went to UNC Wilmington, go Seahawks. But this is the Blazers need frontline depth. They have 14 roster spots. They have one NBA roster spot, 14 players, and when the 15th roster spot is open, I don't think they're going to add to that roster spot. These are all guys who are going to be competing for a two-way spot. Brandon Williams has taken the first two-way spot. The way two-ways work, certainly conceivable that Brandon Williams could be waived, but I think he's shown enough to the Blazers should hang on to him and say, he's got he can't shoot, but he's got a lot of downhill juice as a driver, and certainly is a reasonable emergency point guard that they found last year, and should probably hold down that two-way spot. So you're talking about, basically, there's some other guys, they've brought Isaiah Miller, who's a point guard, and Jared Rhoden, who's a 6'6" wing, and then 2 bigs right now with Cacok and Olivier Sarr, who's a 7-footer with a little bit of outside range. I think it's between Cacok and Sarr for that last two-way spot would be my presumption, is that they'll have bigs come in and compete for it. We'll see what happens. Conceivably, they could add 2. Conceivably, they could add 3 and add 1 to the end of the NBA roster, but I don't think they will do that. I think they will carry 14 into the regular season for flexibility and financial reasons, and they will just add one of these training camp guys, most likely a big man, to that second two-way spot. If I had to lean one direction, I don't. We can just wait and see what they look like in training camp, et cetera, et cetera. But if I had to lean one direction, I would go Sarr, because I think they could use a true center if need be, but Cacok can play center in the league. Like he's enough of the right size to play center in the league, and I think you could sort of get away with it. And Sarr probably can't play power forward, so if you have less defensive versatility there, right? Or less just positional versatility there. The Portland needs frontline depth. They need help. Either one of these guys is like a hey, if things go wrong, you need to play type of option, not someone competing for regular playing time. So if it is Cacok or Sarr, regardless, I think it's fine. But as we go into training camp, that's the matchup to monitor, is which big guy wins that two-way spot. And if they don't go a big with that two-way spot, if they don't go a big with the two-way spot, it's like, now, why did they do that? It is a true Brian Windhorst's confusion, and that'll be something we monitor as training camp kicks off the last week of September. All right, let's close the show with a couple listener questions. We've got a mini mailbag here on Wednesday's show. Join me in the third segment, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Talked Nurk. The end of his EuroBasket tours come to an end. We talked Davontae Cacok, 6'8", big man who's going to compete for training camp minutes. But I got some other questions from listeners. The first one I've got from a bunch of people. I'll shout out Marcus for sending me this one. Thanks to Marcus for sending me this one. But I've seen it as posed on. I saw it posted on r/Rip City on Reddit. Someone tweeted it at me. I got a couple people tweeted at me, a couple people mentioned it someone mentioned it in the YouTube comments. Like, this is something that is on Blazer fans' mind. But Marcus sent this directly to the email lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. If you want to send a question, that is the best way to do so. lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Marcus asks, could Dzanan Musa help the Blazers? In so many words. It was a little longer than that. But Dzanan Musa is a 6'9" forward who's playing for the Bosnian national team, who was awesome at EuroLeague. Like, so far and away Bosnia's best player. Finished averaging 21.4 points on 70% true shooting. He was wild. 50, 40, 86 on your shooting splits. He was so good on offense. He is big at 6'9", but he's probably more 3 than 4. Like, I recognize that the differentiators between the forward positions matter less and less in the modern NBA, but for my money, the thing I'm drawing is that he's not a big bruising 4 type. Like, he's much more 3 who could play up, as opposed to he's more of a slashing wing than he is like a posty big man. He played 4, he was the second tallest guy on the court. He's a front court player for sure. He was awesome. He's a former first-round pick, 29th overall pick by the Brooklyn Nets that just didn't stick in the league and has since gone back to Europe, where he's been a very productive player, and this summer signed a 2-year deal to join Real Madrid. I couldn't find the details reported of that pact he made with Real Madrid, but he has likely, if you are signing at the top level of Europe with a massive club like Real, you're just making more money than you would as on a smaller deal in the NBA, certainly more money than a minimum. And coming in now, he would probably start at a minimum. Maybe he could bump up above that and get somebody's mid-level money somewhere in there, but he's not making $7, $8, $10 million a year. We're talking the difference in $2 million and some change and $3 million and some change. He might have to take a pay cut, and if he doesn't have to take a pay cut, he's going to have to take a roll cut, likely to be in the NBA. The line between star in Europe and starter in the NBA is very, 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 very thin. But if you're not a starter in the league and you're a bench guy or a rotation guy, you're the 8th, 9th man, it's probably just not as nice quality of life. You don't, and it's such a smaller role, and the money's not that different. Do I think Dzanan Musa is an NBA player from watching him play 3 consecutive EuroBasket games now closely? Yeah, absolutely. He can shoot it. He's got some passing chops. He can get to the rim, and he's 6'9" with a handle. Yes, that is an NBA player. But what level of NBA player is it, and is it enough for him to convince him to leave where he's at? I don't know. Like I would assume no, right? Like I would assume that Real Madrid and the role he has at Real Madrid is like a better job than he would get in the league. Could he help the Blazers, which is really Marcus's question? Yeah, yes. Like, would I rather have, kind of the way I'm thinking about it is like, would I rather have Dzanan Musa or Jabari Walker for immediately next season? I think Musa's probably a better basketball player. He's 23 years old. Like, he's still young and really good. He could help. Jabari Walker is like, maybe a better, certainly for my money, like looks like a better rebounder, maybe potentially a more versatile defender. But like, if you're talking like immediate helper, Musa. Obviously, you're not making that choice. Like if you were to add, Blazers have an open roster spot, they could just give Musa the money and have him join the program if they so choose. He'd have to get out of his 2-year agreement with Real Madrid, and I don't really understand all the politics of that, quite frankly. A recently signed contract with Madrid, I'm not sure that they would let him just cancel it and join the NBA. They probably want a good basketball player, a good 23-year-old basketball player on their team as well. But to answer the simple question, could he help the Blazers? Yes, absolutely could. Like, to me, he looks like a quality NBA player. I'm not like talking like I haven't scouted him super closely, and I've mostly just watched the Bosnia games at EuroBasket with a handful of like late minutes and some highlight stuff from the other folks. But like, yes, I think he's an NBA player but being NBA quality and having interest in being a role player in the league is very, very different. Could he help? Yes. Will he come over? It seems unlikely. Seems like he's got a really good gig over in the second best league in the world in Spain for one of the top teams in that league with Real Madrid. It didn't work for him in the league. It's hard to stick. And then once, do you want to continue to be a journeyman and bounce around, or do you want to play closer to home where you have a bigger role in Europe and in a really, really competitive league? I think Musa's got it figured out signing with Real Madrid. Final question of the show. This one comes from my dad. The good thing about being at his house, he can ask me the podcast questions in person, and he posed this to me this morning. He said in his, he's not a diehard Blazer fan, but he listens to the podcast, regularly listens to the Locked On Blazers. Appreciate you listening, Dad. Appreciate you posting this to me at breakfast as well. But basically, the Blazers have typically come in with relatively high expectations over the last 4 or 5 seasons, right? Like, this is a team that's supposed to win 45-ish games, compete for the second round of the playoffs, compete for a Western Conference Finals. This year, it appears that the expectations have shifted from his perception from, borderline playoff team to a couple different sports books saying that the Blazers won't even win half their games. The projection of them winning somewhere like 37 to 40 games is like mostly where the betting lines are. So the perception has changed. And what my dad asked was, when's the last time that they wildly outperformed expectations? Not just outperformed, but like significantly outperformed expectations. And to me, the most recent time that they did that was the 2015-16 season. That was the summer that LaMarcus Aldridge left, and the Blazers entered that season projected to win 27.5 games, a number that the team certainly remembered when the Westgate book that ESPN uses posted a headline that gave all the odds, and it was 27.5 games. Maybe our good friends at BetOnline were a little closer to the actual line, which ended up being at 44 games. But certainly the team remembered that, and when they outperformed that over-under line by nearly 17 full games, it was a talking point in the locker room. What did they think of us? In fact, I remember a moment when I was doing a story about how the Blazers had exceeded expectations late in the season and they were headed towards the playoffs and all these things. And I was talking to Ed Davis. A group of us was talking to Ed Davis, maybe 3 reporters in the corner were talking to Ed Davis's corner locker stall. And he was saying, he was joking, and doing the interview, he started to walk away, and I said, well, you didn't think you would be here, Ed, because he was saying like, well, y'all doubted us too, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you didn't think you'd be here, Ed. And he goes, hell no. I thought we'd be on vacation this time of year. And instead, they went and played the Clippers in the playoffs, ended up winning that series and making the second round of the playoffs. And playing a really good Warriors team tough and losing in 5 games, what the Warriors called the toughest 5-game series ever. It was starting the string of losses to the Warriors in the playoffs. In some ways, this season reminds me of that run. It reminds me of that run for two reasons. One, the exodus of a staple and a very good player. LaMarcus Aldridge was much better in 2015 than CJ McCollum is in 2022. But a long-time era, the Damon LaMarcus era, coming to an end. The Damon CJ era coming to an end. There's some parallels there. And the sort of waiting in the wings next guy ready to pick up and be Dame's running mate. The way it was CJ McCollum and he won MIP that season is Anthony Simons, who could conceivably win MIP this season, is ready to step into a bigger role and prove that when he's been so good in smaller samples, he's ready to expand that to 82 games and be a beast. It was CJ's breakout year, and he was basically that good for the following 7 seasons. Like he was really good that year, and that became his sort of new level of play. Anthony Simons is heading into something very similar. In addition, there was just a massive roster overhaul that year heading into that 15-16 season. That wasn't the summer of 2016 when they signed Evan Turner and doubled down on everything, but it was adding Ed Davis, adding Al-Farouq Aminu, letting go of the core of Wes Matthews and Robin Lopez and Nick Batum and LaMarcus Aldridge and rebuilding around Dame. It's not quite as dramatic this year, but if you look at starting what the roster started with last season to what the roster started with this season, it's a dramatic turnover. In some ways, those 2 years, I don't know if they mirror each other, but there are some obvious similarities. The Blazers are picked, like I said, BetOnline has them at 40.5 is their over/under. A losing team, right? If you take the under, a losing team, a team that loses more games than they win, and if you take the over, a team right at 500. Obviously, the over is infinite, right? But a team right at 500. It's not infinite. They play 82 games, Michael. They could go 82-0. That's the most wins they could have, you dummy. I think the Blazers, for my money, I think the Blazers are likely to outperform that over/under. I don't think they're wildly going to outperform it, but if you believe that there are parallels to that 2015 season, I don't think the Blazers are going to win 57 and be 17 games over their projected over/under, but I think they have a chance they have the talent, if they stay healthy and things break right, to be better, notably better. I think realistic ceiling, and maybe you're a bigger believer than me, but realistic ceiling seems like 48 wins. I think that's a little high. I know some people out there saying this team could win 54 games. It. I don't think that. So we just disagree there. But this team has a chance to outperform their over/under. They have a chance to, with a revamped roster built again around Dame part 2, the remix, with a up and coming young guard who's ready to step into a bigger role. This is a team that is on a course not too dissimilar from the course in 2015 that set off a bunch of years of being really competitive and culminated with a 2019 Western Conference Finals run after some ups and downs along the way over those other 5 seasons. They're entering a new era. The last time they were this doubted was another time of entering a new era. The unknown is hard for the betting markets and hard for the outside folks to grok. I think there's reason to be excited about this new era, regardless whether you are more pessimistic than me or much more optimistic than I am. This is the place that's going to have you covered. We're going to start our season previews of players heading into the season this week, end of this week and next week. Friday's show, we will look at a season preview of Anthony Simons. Is he ready to take the jump? In many ways, the bellwether for this season. If Ant's ready, his team's going to be pretty darn good. He's among the most important players on the Blazers roster this season. We'll start with him in our season previews on Friday's show and continue with more next week. So do me a favor and tell your friends about this podcast. The way people find out about podcasts is in market advertising, is advertising for the show that you're going to hear right after this one plays. Go listen to our sister shows. Go check out Locked On NBA Big Board. They're doing a great job. Shout out to Raphael Barlow. But word of mouth. Tell your friends about the show. If you enjoy the show and you have friends who are Blazer fans, say, hey, I like Locked On Blazers. You should check it out. That's the best way to help the show. I appreciate you listening. And I will talk to you soon.